So, okay, so hi all, my name is Isaac. To those of you who don't know me, I'm based at Western Sydney University and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow there. Most of my work up to now has been in Cambodia, and I'm interested in doing much more with the CERN Asia network. The session today then is a roundtable exchange with presenters on current and emerging projects in the region. And we're looking to explain how we're engaging with the community economies idea and approaches, what the emerging findings are and our questions and challenges. So we'd like all participants to help us collaborate in thinking exercise after the presentations to make connections between the project presented and also to their own work, and to discuss how we might take our research interests forward in the CERN Asia network. And also how we may encourage others in our network to get involved as well. Okay. So Pryor, do you want to go next?
Yep. Hi, my name is Pryor Placino. I'm currently in Bangkok doing my postdoctoral research at the Thammasat University School of Global Studies. Bhavya?
Thanks, Pryor. Hi, my name is Bhavya, and I'm doing my PhD from Institute of Culture and Society at Western Sydney University, and I work with the Economies, which is a Indigenous single women farmers collective in India. And yep, looking forward to this session and the discussion about CERN Asia network. Anne?
Hi everyone, I'm Anne Hill and I'm from the University of Canberra Centre for Sustainable Communities, and I guess I define myself now as a human geographer turned geography community educator, because I now work much more in education than I did before. But I began my academic life working with Katharine Gibson in the Philippines on my PhD back in 2008 in diverse economies and food systems. So it's really great to be here. Thanks. And Katharine McKinnon, how about you go next?
Thanks, Anne. I'm Katharine McKinnon. I'm a human geographer and I'm working with Anne at the Centre for Sustainable Communities at the University of Canberra. And I'm also a board member of the Community Economies Institute, which is the organisation of volunteers who've been doing the background work for this. Okay, over to Istvan.
Hey, hello everyone, I'm Istvan Rado. I'm based at the School of Global Studies at Thammasat, same as Pryor. Yeah, I'm a lecturer here for almost 7 years now, focusing a lot on lecturing because we have more and more programs. So not too much research nowadays. Yeah, that's it about me. Who else? So among the presenters, I think everybody already introduced
let's
themselves.
go around to everyone. Yeah.
To everyone. In that case, Bethany.
Hello, thank you. I'm Bethany Turner. I'm from Canberra as well, coming to you from Ngunnawal in the Ngambri country. And I'm in the Centre for Creative and Cultural Research, and I'm very new to the network and excited to be part of this. And my work long ago was about Mexico and social revolutionary movements in Mexico, but of late, of the last decade, it's been on urban agriculture, particularly around Canberra and the regions. But currently I'm in a fellowship in Hong Kong. I'm not in Hong Kong, I'm in Canberra, working around issues to do with food production and also food waste management with a colleague there. So I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you. I'm going to throw to, who will I throw to? Who haven't we heard from? Is it okay to throw to people with their screens off as well? I might throw to Ying.
Hello. God, as you throw to me, I just wanted to turn on my camera so that I'm not the person who are off the screen. And then here I am. Hello, everyone. I'm Ying. I'm from China, southern part of China, very close to Hong Kong. And I was honored enough to have met Katharine Gibson in South Forum 2 years ago. And I'm living in eco village, well, intentional community, and of course, community economy has been very crucial for our work here. Yeah, so that is how I got to know about the network, and I want to learn about the experience that all of you have, especially in Asia. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, then I would like to invite Justin.
Thanks, Ying. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin C. I was very fortunate to be supervised by Katharine McKinnon for my PhD project looking at climate change adaptation in the Philippines. I'm currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Sustainable Communities at the University of Canberra, working with Kat Gibson, Katharine McKinnon, and Pryor Placino in a research project. So I'll hand it over to Kat Gibson.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, wonderful to see you all, meet you all, and wonderful to see Ying again, and Anup I hadn't seen for many, many years, so wonderful to see you all. I'm here based in Sydney at the Institute for Culture and Society on the banks of the Georges River here at the back of me, and working on a new project with Katherine and Pryor and Justin, doing work in Papua New Guinea. Not that we're physically going to be able to do that, but some scoping work there, which is quite exciting to get back into that context. Let me pass it on to Putri.
Hello, everybody. My name is Putri. I'm from Indonesia. I'm so delighted to be in this forum. I'm currently doing master degree at the University of Canterbury under Kelly Dombrowski's supervision. So my thesis is sort of like saying through another lens of diverse economy with the case of social resilience at Christchurch Farmers Market. Yeah, nice to meet you all. Moving on to Salika.
Salika, are you with us? Salika, you are muted.
You can hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Laos. I'm a regular researcher in National University of Laos. Now I will conduct the research with Dr. Isaacs. Yeah, and really nice to meet you, everyone.
I think we're just missing Anup. Yes.
That leaves Kerry, yes.
Kerry. We haven't heard from Kerry yet. Hi, Kerry.
Sorry, hi. I just have my video on. I'm just double tasking, but I'll be 100% with everyone shortly. My name's Kerry. I am here in Naarm, Melbourne, in Wurundjeri country in Southeast Australia, but I am a student of Katharine McKinnon is supervising me for my PhD. But I don't actually do any work in Asia currently, but have a very keen interest. So looking forward to all of your work, to hearing about all of your work. And was that just finally Anup?
Yeah, thank you. I actually teach at an university in India, Ambedkar University, Delhi. And we have a center called the Center for Development Practice, not development studies, as you can see. And as part of the center, we work in about 112 villages in central and eastern India. And it's largely work with communities inspired by the community economies collective's work and Gibson Graham's work. I'll share about it when we do the session with Bhavya.
Thank you very much. Lovely to hear where everyone's coming from. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think we've got, we're going to run through 6 very quick presentations, and I'm going to be an extremely strict timekeeper. And I'll need someone to be a strict timekeeper for me when it's my turn. But I'd like to hand over then to Isaac to kick us off. You need to unmute, Isaac.
Isaac, you're still muted.
Okay, are we good? Am I just showing one slide at the moment, or am I? Hello?
We can see the PowerPoint.
We can hear you now.
Click on present, the present button, and then we'll just be able to see the one.
Okay, sorry. Which is the present button?
The little square with the arrow going into it.
Square.
The bottom, the very, very bottom set of icons down at the bottom of the
next
screen.
to the slider.
I'm confused by this layout. I'm sorry, I haven't seen this layout before.
Click on the 3 dotted, the 3 dots inside
right,
that.
Okay,
yeah.
3 dots and then hide
presenter view.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, I'm good. Sorry about that. That's new to me. Okay, so yeah, my project, the project I'm presenting is based in Cambodia and Laos on digital finance and smallholder farming. The project is funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, or ACR, and it will be working with to explore digital finance and smallholder farming households in Cambodia and Laos, delivered in collaboration between 4 universities. By way of background, there has been a lot of economic change in Cambodia and Laos in the last 20 years, but more than 70% of the population is still rural in both countries, and more than 50% of households in both countries still largely depend on small-scale farming for income and their food security. International development has historically tried to tackle rural poverty through microfinance loan schemes. Now it has moved on to financial inclusion of the so-called unbanked people. So it's really the latest paradigm in poverty reduction, with the theory being that access to financial services gives people more options to escape poverty. This is being increasingly addressed through digital financial services delivered by mobile handsets, which are thought to have 2 main benefits. Firstly, mobile handset devices overcome the geographical barriers, including not being able to be close to a bank or a microfinance institution. So for remote people, it's seen as a leapfrogging technology that actually gets around the bank altogether. Secondly, smartphone applications can provide a range of different services and products. So besides credit, there can be access to savings, there can be remittance payments from migrated workers, and also services designed for agriculture specifically, such as crop insurance, all delivered through a handset device. However, studies up to now have mostly focused on supply and demand issues, like how to facilitate or grow the markets for these services. There is little by the way of impact, really, and studies tend to just assume that the impact is positive, or they stop at proving financial inclusion, which in itself is deemed to be an impact seemingly without negative consequences. These pictures are related to Wing mobile money in Cambodia, by far the largest mobile money provider. Wing has expanded using an over-the-counter service model involving more than 8,000 mobile money agents in cities and villages, 80% of whom are women. The pictures fit the overarching narrative of mobile money, and also the narratives drawing on some of the econometric research, which does deal with impact, mainly in Africa up to now, which shows that mobile money gives women in particular the ability to take a wider range of economic opportunities, including micro-entrepreneurship, or to enhance a micro-business that they already run with new kinds of income. It also fits a narrative that mobile money itself is a safer way of storing money than keeping cash at home, where there is a risk of theft or greater pressure from other household members to spend money unproductively. Some of the literature also insists that the mobile money is a safer way of using and storing money than traditional rotating and credit associations. Digital finance technology is not without problems. However, financial literacy is prerequisite to using the products, and sometimes it is hard or tiring to develop this. Users' privacy is compromised when people click a consent button without understanding what they are consenting to. Sometimes the app may be integrated with their social media accounts, which causes privacy concerns. The idea that digital money is inherently secure is also questionable. One article in The Economist shows that in the Philippines in 2016, 83% of people have been targeted by different kinds of mobile phone scams. So the learning edges, well, reading so far on the grey literature from development agencies, they are clear about financial inclusion being their overarching objective. However, the discussions I'm having and the readings also show that the developers of digital financial products do not always have inclusive goals in mind. Campaigns often present digital finance products as aspirational, with images of people leading a lifestyle that would leave a receptive viewer imaginably wanting to be anything other than a farmer. One of the most widely stated studies says that the positive impact in Kenya is that women stop farming altogether. So it gets a bit confusing when digital finance is supposed to be the solution for farmers and also the reason why they would stop doing this, usually to become a micro-entrepreneur, without much thought of whether the business is successful or if they even want to be a micro-entrepreneur or not. A curiosity in this project is therefore what digital finance practices farmers do use that are completely outside the imagination of developers, development agencies, and researchers alike. Or in other words, what lies outside of what we might feasibly conceive of as smart farming. A further
2 minutes left, Isaac.
Further curiosity relates to a point earlier about decision fatigue, which is a technology treadmill. Research in Laos, for instance, finds men are more selective about new technologies in farming, while women are more likely to be super adopters of different technologies and practices, which they also more quickly abandon. The paper links this to women wanting to save time on farming tasks in order to spend more money seeking off-farm income. It also speculates this might be explained by a stronger sense of male identity attached to farming, making the big decisions, doing the tasks involving machinery, while women have been tended to be confined to tasks classified as helping, like weeding or planting rice stalks by hand. The paper did not speak of digital finance per se, but it is still important following this line of inquiry to explore what kinds of pressures women users of digital finance come under in particular. And this feeds into a general point about the project, which is setting out to improve methods of evaluation in the field by filling in gaps and unearthing flaws in the evaluation methods currently in use. And these are the things that I think so far I could do with help with just basically thinking otherwise about digital finance and farming from a community economies perspective. And these are some of the questions that have come to mind so far. Thank you. Are we good?
Thanks, Isaac. It's great. Totally in the time frame too. Wonderful. So I think if you stop sharing the screen, then I'll go to mine. So thanks. I'm talking today about a project that's in Cambodia. It's really only just started, and my component of the project is the part that I'll be talking about. Sorry, can everyone see that all right now? Okay, great. So
you want me to keep
project,
Katharine, do you want me to keep time for you?
I've got my clock.
Okay,
it'll
no worries.
Tell me. So the bigger project is called Next Generation Agricultural Extension, Social Relations for Practice Change. It's funded by the same agency, by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. And it's a follow-on from a previous research project that was looking at farmer uptake of agricultural technology. So basically an investigation of agricultural extension work done with farmers in the northwest of Cambodia in Battambang region. And the findings of that project are kind of what this work is extending. So there's a few really key things. One was that agricultural extension wasn't really doing the job it's meant to do. If farmers are learning new techniques, they're learning it from neighbors and friends and family members, not from people who are supposed to be there helping them out. Or they got it from commercial providers of farm chemicals who would sell them chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, and teach them how to use those on their farms. Those were the main sources of new knowledge. Another key finding was that priority concerns of farmers and extensionists often didn't match. Extensionists have this real concern with increasing yields always, even though actually increased yields in this case of cassava aren't always a very rational decision, especially if the price for cassava has just gone down. So farmers were much more careful and very risk averse, and were making decisions that didn't always reflect an increase of yield priority, but were in themselves rational, logical, and climate sensitive. Debt is endemic and a huge challenge for these farmers. Most farmers were in debt. And yeah, interesting to think about the focus then on mobile banking and how much is it just going to fuel this endemic debt situation. Farmers reported feeling isolated. They didn't know where to go for help. They felt their livelihoods were precarious. And for them, the sort of profit maximization and yield maximization simply aren't the driving forces, but that farmers are innovators and practitioners of sustainable development. Woohoo. So when I learned about the findings of this first project, I kind of couldn't believe what I was hearing, because here we are in, what year are we now? 2021. And these sounded like the findings of work with farmers from 30, 40 years ago when agricultural extension was being critiqued. But the premise of this is, hey, agricultural extension isn't really doing what it could. What would it look like if it actually took these things seriously and was something different? So the premise of this whole project is, what could the next generation of agricultural extension look like if we began with the premise that farming is not just about production, but it's about the more than human relationships, that farmers are constantly reacting to and responding to their land. They're working with markets, they're learning from friends and family, and they're managing and negotiating across all of these complex relationships all the time. And if that's the starting point, would extension look different, and how might it look? So here's all our partners involved. It's a really big project. It's a 5-year project with a whole lot of different inputs. I'm doing one piece of the puzzle, which is the part that is looking at trying to give visibility to the diverse economies of farming households ultimately. How are livelihoods made in this relational way? What does that look like? What are farmers doing? So the work I'm doing comes out of earlier parts that are going to be done in the next couple of years and feeds into a final section of the project where we are trying to come up with a few experiments in what this new kind of agricultural extension might look like. The assumptions I'm bringing into this are: one, agricultural extension is really good at coming up with lots of technical advice. They're very good at being the experts, have been for decades, and are really not very good at listening to farmers and learning from farmers. And to be honest, I'm having come back into this area of agricultural and rural development after sort of 10 years away. I'm horrified that these are lessons that still need to be learned after all this time. I feel like I'm on a cycle of repeat. My assumption is that farmers are experts on their own social and cultural context, their own political context, their own ecological context. They're people that know how to listen to the land and work with the land. I'm also going into it assuming that if you just ask farmers what they need or what they want, you're not always going to get a good answer. You're often going to get an answer that is related to, well, here you are, you're an agricultural expert. What do I need? Well, I need you to do pest control for me. Whereas a bigger story and a shared analysis and a conversation might come to the conclusion that actually my biggest challenge is that I really want to get some education for my children and I'm struggling to balance everything. So maybe some shared childcare arrangement, maybe money for free education would be the solution to my problems, not pest control. But you need space to think with farmers as co-researchers to allow that to happen. That's the assumption that I bring in to this work. And I'm also bringing in the assumption that my presence in these conversations will change the outcome, because I've got my own ideas about what a good livelihood looks like. And it's one very much with a sense of what is sustainable, what is equitable, what is good for a community as a whole. And to deny that I've got that interest in there is a dishonest place to start, I think. So I'm going into the project with this and aiming to ask this series of questions. What are diverse economic practices like now? What are the assets that people are already using, whether they're material assets or knowledge assets? What are the aspirations of households? And this is a difficult conversation. It's a difficult conversation in any household. What does a good life look like for you and how might you get there? What are farmers already doing to get that life that they want? And then what experiments might help them get there? So that's the task I've got in this much larger project. Then the next stage will go to the experimentation phase. I'm finishing up. My tools are about using these familiar community economies strategies of mapping diverse economies, doing asset-based needs maps, thinking about balancing time for life and time for production, storytelling. But I feel very uncertain about it all. I feel like the tools themselves perhaps impose too much structure on the conversations that you can have with farmers. So I'm sitting with that and wondering about how to do it going forward. So now I'm going to hand over, I think, to Bhavya to take the next round.
Thanks, Katherine. I'll just quickly share my screen. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak here today. We're going, like Anup and I are going to talk about little about this MPhil in development practice program that he already mentioned, and the kind of transformative praxis work and collaborative action research work that we've been doing. So Anup and I have been working together for almost 10 years now when the center was set up in 2012. And he has been my mentor and guide throughout like this whole journey that I've had. And I was the first batch of MPhil development practice at Ambedkar University in Delhi. And that's how I got this opportunity to immerse myself in a village in India, which is called Imaligura in Odisha for 2 years. So I'm just going to sort of talk about this journey a little bit. In this village, I shared the household with a separated single woman, Arnalu Vinyaka, who you can see on the screen. I call her Aya, and Aya in the native language means mother. Aya has been living alone for over 25 years now, and when I moved in with her in 2013, she demanded that I be the daughter that she's never had. She had no family, and I was distanced from mine, so loneliness in that little home that we lived together in brought us close to each other. Aya slowly introduced me to her life, taught me her language, how to live, learn, and relate within the community that I was in. I used to spend most of my time laboring with her and other women in the village. And as I engaged in laboring activities, which is what women largely do in this community, I experienced female friendships and soon became part of it. These women did not shy away from speaking openly about painful life experiences, and we often engaged in this affective exchange of our life stories as women, especially single women. We began sitting together in the evenings and delved deeper into our experiences of singleness. Eventually, this led to the forging of the Eka Nari Sangathan, which is the Single Women's Collective, if we translate that. As more and more women shared their stories and learned about each other's lives, they started helping each other in matters related to illness, workload, building each other's houses, looking after their children, each other's children, etc., which for a single woman would usually be her own, would be her own burden. The Sangathan began evolving as a women's collective that hosted relationships of care and companionship based on communitarian ethic and value systems of the Kui Luko, the original inhabitants of the land, which this community is comprising of. Subsequently, the women decided to lobby with the government and non-governmental organizations to secure pensions for older single women, opening saving bank accounts for themselves, ensuring homestead land and jobs for single women in the village. And this was not limited to the women in the Sangathan, but all single women in the village. As ENS pushed for single women's agenda in the area, these organizations began acknowledging and integrating the issues of single women in several projects and policies which have taken place over the last 10 years. With singleness coming into focus, the women in ENS began exploring other aspects of their intersecting identities. Given farming was at the core of their existence as Adivasi, quote unquote, indigenous women, ENS members wanted to reclaim their relationship to land and their identity as women, single women farmers. Since year 2017, ENS has been engaging in collective caring, management, and cultivation of leased plots of common land. So there are about 40 women who cultivate a common piece of land together. The communitarian ethic extends to the land that women cultivate together and how ENS practices non-exploitative laboring and non-extractive exchange. This is combined with ongoing exploration of diverse economic processes within the community and mapping of post-capitalist possibilities within the Sangathan. We focus on the existing non-capitalist class processes in the village Imaliguda and engage in communist class process where surplus is collectively performed and appropriated. Additionally, ANS undertakes several experiments every year to engage in indigenous and ecologically sensitive farming methods and techniques to cultivate food crop varieties which are going extinct as we speak. These attempts have been challenging and full of disagreements and negotiations within the Sangathan, which maybe we can delve later into the discussion. But what keeps us going is the collective spirit and friendship we share and value in building our worlds together and with each other. So this was just the gist of the kind of work that we've been doing. And I will hand over to Anup to sort of take us through the journey of the center.
Yeah, just building on where Bhavya has left us. This work that Bhavya has done, of course, with an intensity that is appreciated. We have also tried to do in Central India, Central and Eastern India, in about 100 plus villages over the last 10 years. And our inspiration actually came from, on the one hand, what we saw in the rear view mirror, Gandhi and Tagore, who were making a case for rural reconstruction. Reconstruction, not development. And Gibson Graham's work around community economies, but also the important question of becoming in the context of a politics of place. And that
it's
is
about
the
2 minutes left.
Yes. That is the connection we were trying to work on over here actually, and see whether we could think politics, one, beyond critique, politics as reconstruction, whether we could see politics as a triad of resistance, reconstruction, and transformation, whether we could see research in a non-extractive, non-appropriative way, and where research is not just fieldwork, but what we have tried to call immersion over here. Immersion in the other's sometimes impossible, unassimilable sea. So the idea over there was to actually connect social suffering and social healing, bring the question of relationships to the foreground, not go with the research question, but the action research question emerge from what we call community context or field, and where the important point is to co-research and work with rather than work on communities. And here the idea was that we would work towards a transformative process, transformation not just of the community, but what has remained very, very important for us, self-transformation, learning to learn from below, working in indigenous contexts with respect, care, and concern, and keeping ourselves open to the questions, concerns that are coming up over here. And this was hence have been an attempt by us. There are no success stories. There are more failures than successes, but it was an attempt to connect, and as here Katharine just now, connect to what we have tried to call indigenous or subaltern know-how, where the register of the knowing, and the register of the how to do, how to transform, how to reform, are connected. And the work
That's
of
the 8 minutes.
yes just the last line, and the work is then a search for a methodology that is not marked simply by a desire for power or a desire for knowledge, but which is meaningful and is informed by indigenous worldviews, and is emancipatory in that sense. Quickly put. Thank you, Katharine.
Thanks so much. Wonderful. I'm handing on now to Pryor.
Let me share my screen. Yep, hope you can see it now. Thank you, Kat and Isaac, for co-organizing this wonderful session. My presentation today is based on a paper of the same title that Katharine, Gibson, and I co-wrote and submitted to the Asia Pacific Viewpoint Journal 2 months ago, so it's currently under review. In that paper, we are interested in the way the rapid urbanization happening in Asian cities is entangled with places where raw materials for concrete are produced. And invoking ecofeminist Val Plumwood, it is very timely to examine these concrete industries' shadow places. Because at the planetary scale, anthropogenic climate change is severely threatening current and future well-being. And concrete is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and environmental degradation. So we suggest that these concerns need to be put on the agenda when multiple actors think about other building pathways for the future, and considering the recent downturn of construction activities due to COVID-19 pandemic. So our research focuses on the Philippines, specifically Metro Manila and its edges, where a community of informal miners make a living by manually digging and crushing stones for the cutthroat construction industry. In this upstream supply chain, the miners work as self-employed laborers with flexible work arrangement and working without the watchful eyes of a boss. This economic practice, however, is far from ideal and need not be romanticized, given that it is physically demanding and provides low remuneration. In the literature on artisanal and small-scale mining, or ASM, informal mining is typically characterized in terms of its deficiencies as illegal, unregulated, polluting, and dangerous. And informal miners are identified as poor, landless individuals who are excluded from the formal economy and driven to work in unsafe working conditions by the cycle of poverty. So our research then challenges these existing representations. As a first strategy for rethinking, we situate informal mining in the diverse economy of concrete. We use an image of the building structure to represent an inventory of this economic plurality. While writing the article, we were very much encouraged by the discussion during one recent Community Economies Institute symposium on how diagrams can advance community economies thinking. And this is our immediate contribution to that stimulating conversation. Similar to the iceberg image of diverse economy drawn earlier by Gibson Graham, our reinterpreted diagram depicts that the capitalist concrete industry is just the above ground building structure. In the Philippines, for example, private corporations produce the largest volumes of sand and gravel for the construction industry and cater to the growing local market. The dominant players are nationally owned companies and other being branches of multinational corporations, which are part of that above ground structure. But below ground, there are hidden commodity chains and illegal production processes involving informal mining livelihoods. Other non-capitalist market, labor, enterprise, property, and finance are also found in the underpinning structure. So the diverse economy framing has also helped us to kind of open the cracks where we can reveal the contribution of informal aggregate quarrying to the survival portfolio of poor households. So take, for example, this stone pile image, which illustrates the range of activities that are combined in a household livelihood portfolio. In our paper, we provide a rich description that helps to divorce informal miners from prevailing notions of irresponsibility and lack of environmental concern. So instead of looking at what's lacking in informal mining livelihoods, we see them through their strengths, assets, and potentials. So we work alongside a group of informal miners to see how they negotiate their extractive practice and the extent to which ethical concerns guided their action. And so that's our engagement with the community economies approach. So for example, informal miners agree on rules of use and how households and individuals will benefit from aggregate production. The quarry is a site where a community of miners negotiate joint access to the mineral resource through a puesto arrangement. So puesto is a Tagalog word which literally means place. In the quarry, this term is used to refer to an informal system of claiming ownership of place from a specific point of reference. So in the village, a puesto refers to the extended backyard from a miner's house to the base of the mountain. According to community rules, a miner can only gather stones from and work in his own puesto. Informal miners make access to the quarry more inclusive for the crushers who do not have their own workspace in the quarry. Some crushers are called nakikipuesto, that is those who ask a miner or crusher with a claim on a puesto to allow them to temporarily work and to temporarily use some of the puesto space for stone crushing. So the nakikipuesto will do crushing under a temporary work arrangement. And the nakikipuesto crushes stones for a few hours and gets paid depending on the volume they can produce and based on the personal calculation of the puesto claimant. Typically about 60 Australian cents, so really low. The nakikipuesto usually gets paid after the puesto claimant has been able to sell the pile of aggregate. When the nakikipuesto needs money before the material gets sold, they may ask the puesto claimant for bale or advance payment for the material. So we can see through this example of commoning action that mining families create a community economy that contributes to sustaining their lives. And to conclude, we argue in our paper that the future of mining of sand and gravel is a contested one. The future of concrete as the go-to building material is under question. And in a world in need of repair and restoration of mine-ravaged landscapes and in an industry in need of renewable building materials, informal miners, we think and suggest, have a role to play and have something to contribute. So we have opened up the cracks in the concrete, but the next step is how to nurture a diversity of speculative imaginings and creative collective actions around buildings and livelihoods. So what these things are and how they can take shape will be up for negotiation. And I hope that the collective can contribute to that. So thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Pryor. Istvan, please take over.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. So as my presentation title suggests, what I'm talking about is a conversation between community economy scholarship and social innovation. And as much as time permits, some examples from Thailand as well. Now, talking about a conversation between social innovation and community economy scholarship is not really something new, that a conversation is already going on. So community economy scholarship is associated with what some people call the territorial development perspective on social innovation. Key figures are Frank Mullert, for example, or Diane McKellen. CERN members are also present at social innovation conferences. And a very interesting development in this area, I think, is the development of social impact measurement tools. So since 2013, for example, some members of CERN are developing the community economies return on investment tool. And this development is still ongoing, as you can see in the recent publication here. Now, what I'm talking about here is not really part of a research project, since I'm working at a faculty where we have diverse practitioners and diverse scholars on social innovation. I can see different perspectives in this field. So when I'm talking about a conversation between community economy, scholarship, and social innovation, it's a broader perspective, including also the design perspective, for example, or others. Two key topics that I see might be relevant for us in the network are questions about scaling, for example. So there's much talk in social innovation literature about how to scale existing initiatives, how to grow the impact of existing initiatives. And related to that topic is also the idea of social innovation as something that transforms societies. So these are the two topics that I want to talk about in a little bit more depth. Scaling is not something that community economy scholars or asset-based community development scholars talk about much, but it is something that does take place. So the way that community economies initiatives grow are through networks where member communities share know-how with each other. So for example, looking at the farmers networks here in Thailand, they often share farming techniques with each other or processing techniques to find out how they can create value-added products out of their resources. And this takes place horizontally. So mostly the people who are involved here are people from the same sector. And this somewhat resembles the scaling process in the social enterprise sector. So there is, of course, not networks that are disseminating innovations, but social enterprises, and they focus more on products and prototypes. And an advantage that products and services for beneficiaries have is that they scale more easily. These are tangible, replicable things. Some designers actually want to combine these two advantages. So some designers have been looking into how to engage local people in capacity building, but at the same time creating something that can be scaled more easily than know-how and new skills. So I think one interesting development for us is this idea that so some designers, they engage local people in co-designing activities. They teach local people how to go through the design process so that locals learn how to create their own grassroots technologies out of local resources. This is not something that is entirely new to asset-based community development. So here you see a picture of a water pumping windmill in northeastern Thailand. And this is one of those do-it-yourself technologies that locals there have created. But this focus on technology is not something that is actually part of community economy scholarship or of ABCD. The advantages, however, are that the products that are being created or the technologies that are being created are useful to other farmers as well. So it's easier to connect with other communities based on the creation of this kind of technologies. And I think for action researchers, this also could be an interesting tool to use when we try to involve local communities. So in these co-creation sessions, the spirit that you see is somewhat similar to these joint cooking events, for example, or going on joint excursions.
2 minutes, Istvan.
Okay, because there's this experimentation involved and also a sense of surprise when people are able to create new technologies. Now, what other scholars in the social innovation literature criticize is this kind of a grassroots orientation in some of the scholarship or in some of the literature. So some scholars from perspectives that see social innovation as a transformational force or something that has to create resilience in society. These scholars say that a grassroots perspective on social innovation is not sufficiently, how to say, it's difficult to scale up to create social change. So the scholars from this perspective, they agree that radical alternatives take place or are being developed in niches or by grassroots actors, but they are looking into ways of how these innovations can scale up to change the routines and the norms and the values in society. So they basically say that grassroots actors have to use advocacy to reach out to other sectors of society, like the government, the media, and the private sector. And in this engagement, change values and routines in society. So this is something that these authors are looking into. Often they are using this multi-level perspective that you can see here. So basically how social innovations can scale up to lead to systemic change. That's basically it from me. So these are the two perspectives that I wanted to talk about that we could engage with critically or constructively. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thanks, Istvan. Thanks so much. And now handing over finally to Anne Hill.
Thanks, Katharine, and thanks everyone for such fantastic, rich presentations. I'm actually going to share a video and that's going to be my springboard for generating some discussion with you. So I've just pasted the link in the chat space in case you can't follow this video. So it's about the Global Garden Project, which my colleague in Germany, Robert Holmer, and I began with co-researchers in the Philippines back in 2008. And in 2009, we actually were able to travel to Mindanao, and this is where the video that I'm going to show you took place. It goes for about 6 minutes, so then I'll just make a few comments. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to hear it okay. Maybe Katharine, you can let me know if the volume's okay. Can you hear that?
We can hear something, but we can't see anything.
It's a place where we are connecting our knowledge. So you can't see the video?
No, maybe we just need to click through to the YouTube ourselves and come back.
You probably just need to change your screen over to the video.
Oh, thanks, Katharine. Yes, I think you're right. So let me just share my screen and change to the video one and go back. You're absolutely right. I'll just go back to the beginning. Can you see that
looks
now?
Better. Yep.
Okay, great. Can you hear that okay? So the Global Garden, it's a place where we are connecting our knowledge across Australia, the Philippines, Germany, and other places where you have been. A global garden of ideas and practices and knowledge and skills and resources that we're sharing.
The major challenges of the global food system today is to feed and nourish about 8 billion people, and to do that in a way within planetary boundaries and sustainably. People expect the food to be affordable, but affordable is different from being cheap. And this has resulted, according to my opinion, in broken food systems. More and more food is produced in agro-industrial settings with not much respect for animal dignity and also for care of the environment.
Among ginatanom ang papalya, ning alpate, kamuti, sitaw, malunggay. Katong sobra sa kanang pagkaon sa ato kaugalingon, ang sobra na ibenta sa mga manaot, at di man ato pagkaon sa ato supply lang sa pamilya.
The mapping process that took place in Barangay Balubal today actually started with an orientation and briefing of the concepts, principles, and practices of ABCD. ABCD stands for Asset-Based Community Development. It's a tool that has been used by Xavier University through the Southeast Asia Social Leadership Institute way back in late 1990s, where we started using this tool to really get the assets or the resources in the community and its capacity and inner driven, and then mobilize all these resources and then plan something on how they can actually improve their community. So these are the concepts that we introduced to the Balubal community today. The process has several steps. It started with getting into the significant change stories, storytelling. People love to hear stories of successes. It's not really a story on problems, but it's really story on changes, success, where they were able to identify the different positive factors that lead to these positive changes. And then the second process of the ABCD is the core group formation. So we need strong core group who is knowledgeable about the process, and then who's going to continue with the process. And I guess towards the afternoon, we're able to identify the core group. And the third process is the identification of resources. It's actually now the mapping. The mapping that we did today, we mapped the physical resources. So we started with a GIS generated map as their source or as their base for a visual base for the mapping by the community. And then they indicated based on the map the different resources. So resources are categorized into physical resources. So these are the river systems, infrastructures, where are the farmlands, the mountain ridges, and all those other physical resources. They also identify where are the socio-economic resources, the livelihood, the source of their livelihood. Poultry farms, for example, the piggery, farmland. They also identified that Balubal is really producing a lot of cassava, and their main source of livelihood is cassava.
Among ginatanom is eggplant or talong in Bisaya, and then nasad mi okra, batong, and then we also have penchay ma'am. Ang benepisyo sa pag-garden is first sa among pamilya gaka-apply ni namo, gakatudlo namo sa among pamilya kung sa mga basic nga gardening techniques such as magamit og organic materials.
Tungod ni ana sa mga pag-garden is nakahimong mig family dili sa among school, sa among campus, interact mi sa among mga co-students nga di lang kay sa pag-garden kundi makakuha mi sa nakabuild mi og family sa dili sa school, another family dili sa school, then benefits sa among family kay ang among mga practices diri sa school is among ma-apply sa among balay din sa among community, amo sud silang ma-influensyahan ngayon ani mag-garden ta.
In a nutshell, we need to go back to basics. Therefore, we call our project the Global Garden Project because we have to think globally, but we have to act locally. And I see many initiatives going on with school gardens, backyard gardens, container gardens. So many diverse recipes based on plants, and there are about maybe 10,000, 12,000 plants that are edible. Indigenous crops are there. Nowadays, our food system depends only on very few plants. I think it's less than 10 plants that are commodities that are traded. But outside there are thousands of plants that can be eaten and are healthy, and that would contribute to more diverse food systems.
So just a few follow-up comments. I don't want to spend all my time talking about that project, but more about how in the life of that project, I began to rethink mapping and the role that mapping could play as a strategy for peer-to-peer learning across Australia and the Philippines. And partly that came about because when I wrote a report on that research, Making Vegetables Visible, I was actually drawing on work that I began doing with community economies scholars years ago. So with Katharine Gibson, we were looking at community partnering methods and practices in the Philippines as part of different projects. I've looked at ways to connect, Indigenous knowledge and place-based knowledge across Australia and the Philippines. And so the toolkit that came out of this project was one springboard. But as well, I've been thinking with my colleague Bethany Turner, who's here today, about ways in which our University of Canberra Future of Food initiative that we're both involved in might start to cross-pollinate with work in Asia. And we came across, thanks to Bethany, this very interesting paper about ways in which we can rethink mapping based on Sydney research in Marrickville, but with this idea of maps doing more than representing space, as I was doing in my video. So instead of just thinking about mapping the food system that's there, perhaps starting to think about the way we can recombine or counter map, as my colleague Joseph Pallas in the Philippines says, and how maps might start to do more. So in this paper on the right-hand side of the screen, they talk about complex ecologies and mapping as a way—
And you're at 8 minutes.
Thank you. Mapping as a way of kind of starting to signal more than human-plant-human relations. So I think my last thought would be, coming back to Katharine, what you were saying about uncertainty in methods, and coming back to some of our other speakers today about the opportunities I have to rethink what I'm doing and to reflect as a researcher. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Anne. Wonderful, and thanks to all our speakers. We're running to time. Fantastic. We've got about 20 minutes left, I think, for a bit of time to discuss and bring some threads together. I've been trying to pull out a few threads across the different talks as we've been going. So maybe just to kick us off, I might run through a few of the things that have struck me about all of that. Slightly distracted. The rain has just started bucketing down here, and my partner is trying to do something about the problematic drainage and leaks in the house. So that's the door opening and closing. Apologies for the noise. When it rains, it really rains. So I've heard a few things, and I'm sure others listening have heard different things as well. But these are the ones that really have jumped out for me, I guess. I think one of the really interesting conversations that we might want to have going forward, perhaps across the network, is the way the future is present in these projects in some really different ways. So there's an aspiration to the future in the sort of ideas of transformation and the contested futures around mining, the sort of future focus of innovation, of course, and new technologies. The answers that we're striving for somewhere out there ahead of us. And I think that really sits in tension at the same time with a really strong politics of recognition, which is at the heart of a lot of community economies work, which is about recognizing existing knowledge, existing expertise, existing innovations and adaptations, which is also a real part of the work that's done in terms of how do you bring to the surface the ways that informal miners are enacting a collective, enacting a commons in the work that they're doing. That's about a politics of recognition of the here and now. So I think there's an interesting tension there that might be interesting to explore, particularly in relation to, and I love this term, of Indigenous know-how. And I think something else, another phrase that a lot of us are working with, which is diverse ways of knowing, being and doing as well. So there's something there. There's something coming in about the ethical negotiations that are required on an ongoing basis, both in the communities, what are the ethics of mining moving forward, for example, but also the ethical negotiations around what research is and what it does. So the conversations there around how research itself is an enactment of a political agenda. It is a politics in how you do it, why you do it, what you achieve in the doing of it, which harks back, I think, to conversations that some of us had in a session this morning around activism and protest and community economies. There's an ethical negotiation around scaling that sort of sense of progress, again, the future versus a sense of sufficiency in being with what you have, in a connection with and care for the land, and a care for the self is a story that's in there as well. So self-transformation being a theme, you know, in the work that you're doing in India, changing identities and subjectivities sit across all of these ideas of how you connect to being healthy, the sense of who you are. So we've got subjectivity and identity. And then the last is the objects. So Anne spoke about maps. Istvan spoke about the sort of prototypes and the products that are coming out of a social innovation agenda. And that also goes back to, you know, what role do objects and maps and things that you look at, the images, for example, the I don't know what to call it, the underground of the concrete, the above ground and the below ground of the concrete. What role do these objects play in moving thinking along? You know, they're strategies. Objects are strategies for thinking. They're products that get used. And harking back to the opening talk that we had from Kevin St. Martin, who works with maps and mapping, he talked about those maps creating a shared ontology across all the different stakeholders engaged in shifting conditions for fishing off the northeast coast of the US. So what do the objects do? Not only what do they allow us to do in the creation of them, which I think Anne's work really speaks to, but what do the objects themselves do as we go forward? So those are a few things that I thought were speaking to each other across the talks. But now we'd love you to open it up and hear what spoke to other people. If anyone wants to pick up on any of these threads and or ask questions and respond, the floor's open. Please put your hand up or put something into the chat or dive in. Who would like to go first?
I really like Bhavya's presentation. It's closer to what I'm doing, but I mean, it's making me think more about, I guess, how a lot of the research in my field is stereotyping women inadvertently or deliberately. But I'm wondering, you know, with future thinking, what kind of subject positions and subjectivity shifts I should be looking at, or we should be looking at most directly when it comes to handsets, digital devices, things becoming digital. And you know, whether that's to the detriment of care for the self or whether it can be positive for it in some way. So I'd be interested to continue that discussion with Bhavya much more.
Yeah, I think Thanks for the thought, Isaac. I mean, I think this was also something that we had sort of initiated in the Action Research and CERN Asia event about how during COVID times we're moving to digital platforms and how community work and this kind of engaged action research work is sort of, the nature of it is changing because we're mediating through online digital platforms. And I know for sure that I have at least had a significant share of my own challenges dealing with this shift, because the community that I work with is not quote unquote digitized in this sense and do not engage with online platforms in that sense. So and also the things that I was talking about how relationships transform when you cannot be in a one-on-one face-to-face, you're not there present in the community, and what kind of like affective, emotional, psychological, bodily changes that kind of brings in the research. So I don't really have an answer. It makes me anxious to think that we are moving digitally to digital research too fast. And I was discussing this with Anup in one of our discussions, and I'm somebody who likes using my body when I'm researching, in the sense that I sit next to people, I would cuddle, I would, connect at that level. But yeah, I would like to hear what everyone else is also thinking, because I think we also need to find ways in how we are moving forward. So yeah.
Well, we all exist at the moment as a digital network as well. So, so I think it's partly a question of how do we nourish each other when we're online. Kelly.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me at all?
You're faint. Yeah, I can hear you faintly.
Sorry, I'm just missing. Can you hear me now okay? I'm just on my phone, so I just...
A little bit louder.
Okay. I just wanted to ask about the, I guess, the wider CERN Asia network, and thinking about how many of us, like yourself, Anne, and Katherine, who supervise students in community economies and then return to jobs throughout Asia and are enacting different ways of understanding the world in their regular jobs, in government, or in, even in unrelated jobs, but I wonder if any of you had any thoughts about that kind of scaling out. I know Istvan said scaling out's not enough, but that kind of scaling out of community economies, CERN Asia kind of people. Yeah, it's not quite on your topics, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Well, I'm happy to respond. I think that's a very exciting space for us to explore. So I'd certainly be keen to talk about it more. I mean, I think we've always, I think others might have input, but I think we've always seen ourselves as a community economies research network of practitioners as well as thinkers. And I often regret the fact that when students go off from programs, we don't necessarily have that ability to follow their journey between theory and practice and what happens in their working life. And it would be a really rich way to extend our research network. So, yeah. Katherine, did you have your hand up there to follow?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it's true, it's very hard to kind of map out where everybody goes, but certainly in the case of the action research we did in the Philippines, for instance, Joy and Maureen, who both were our sort of community researchers in place, have then went on to work in the National Anti-Poverty Commission, and were able to bring a lot of that kind of thinking to the projects they are involved in. But again, we haven't kind of gone back and tried to, you know, do that post research about how much it's. I've just incidentally met them again when we've gone back to the Philippines and heard about it. But how you would actually do that sort of impact story would be an interesting thing to try. But I guess that also leads on to a question I had. I was really fascinated, Anup, in saying that you had about 100. You were working in about 100 villages, and you know, just the amount of quality of interaction and so on that Bhavya's had in the place that she's been working has just been incredible. And I just wondered to what extent you've had that many other students working in that many other villages, which would be just an incredible kind of, you know, that's an incredible impact story. I'd love to hear more about how Ambedkar was able to do that. But if you could just tell us a bit more about that, it would be terrific.
Bhavya, should I go first? See, I would admit that the work does not reach that kind of intensity, perhaps, though you cannot hierarchize between work. Also, each work is different and beautiful in their own way, and the small is also beautiful in that sense. But the kind of you know, span or intensity we see in Bhavya's work or Ashutosh's work, who is actually with me over here, and they have worked together in Orissa, Raigara. That kind of intensity also comes from long sustained work. I sometimes say that Bhavya and Ashutosh are anthropologists without a return ticket. So they did not come back. They stayed with the community. They went on. And what we are seeing now is that at least a sustained work of 3 to 5 years takes one to this kind of depth or of relationships, of transformative processes that get unleashed. It folds back on us, and we ourselves change a lot through that. And it has been a learning process for us. We did not know what we were doing when we were going to the field without a research question. What is it for the research question or the action research question to emerge, emanate from the field? This was unknown to us completely. And I think our only thought was that something we have taken from you, as also from Tagore and Gandhi, there must be some inner resource within the community, within indigenous species, on which one can reconstruct rather than demolish and modernize, annihilate and develop. So it was just that kind of Gandhian faith in residual humanity, residual hope, that took us there, actually. But it requires long sustained work. And what you are seeing in Bhavya's work, and Bhavya in a sense is my teacher, actually. I've learned from her, actually, that she stayed there since 2013, January. So she has been there for so many years, and it's perhaps showing that.
I mean, just to follow up on that, it also occurs to me that Kevin St. Martin's work has been embedded in that northeastern fisheries era for 20 years now. So he's got an incredible depth of experience and knowledge that has led then to the kind of work he's able to do. And yet, I mean, I guess this comes back to the kind of issues Istvan's been raising. Like, you know, we don't all have the opportunity to do that long sustained embedded work, and yet we have, you know, there's lots that can be kind of transposed and picked up by other people. I mean, I'd be very interested to hear from Ying about how she's working in the eco-village in China, for instance, and to what extent any of the work that Community Economies has done is helpful in that context. But yeah, we have to kind of balance both those, but it seems like those really in-depth, committed, long-term studies are really nourishing our theory, as are others. But and it's not just that there's only one model, obviously, for that. But how do we kind of balance that? So
I just wanted to add a quick comment, Anup, when I heard you talking just then, but also when you were speaking before, I found it very powerful to think about the way in which the questions emerged from being there, you know, and if we were to turn research projects completely on their head by saying you start with no questions and you don't have an agenda, and then you arrive and you emerge, everything emerges and evolves from co-constructing as you go, it would be completely different, wouldn't it? But so often we have all these preconceived agendas and priorities going in, and we don't, you know, we have to learn how to open up our own thinking. So thank you for helping me to reflect on that. It's just really quite powerful.
I'm just curious to thinking out loud about what that has in common in some ways with grounded theory, even though I don't like grounded theory. I think it's a very structural way of doing research. It's still got the idea that you don't go in with a research question, that you have a lot of work to do before you can even get to that point. Do you see any similarities?
There are connections and convergences, perhaps. They're not separated. But where is the intertwining? One will have to still explore. And we have just done this for 10 years and still learning, actually, Isaac, not certain. But grounded theory, participatory action research, participatory research, all these look to be, you know, co-travelers or siblings, part of a connected space, interdependent space as well. Actually, one learns as one goes.
I think that's a wonderful note on which to finish, because I notice we're now at the end of our time. For me, it's an inspirational final note, because it's so rare, as Kath was saying, it's so rare to be able to go into research work openly. You know, those of us that play the grant application game, you have to pretend that you know everything before you even start, before anyone will give you the money. So the opportunity to not do that is really beautiful. But it also means, I think, that we become so trapped by the insistence to speak as if we know. So it's a beautiful thing to end with that reminder that, you know, the point is to be learning always, and to be opening up and to be asking curious questions. I think for me, that's a really important thing. And yes, so Anne Hill, please do join us for future CERN Asia sessions. I think this discussion and what everyone's spoken about is, I think we might have a full agenda for CERN Asia sessions going for the whole year, where I hope we can pick up the threads of this conversation. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isaac, for organizing us all. Thank you for all the speakers and for everyone who's come along. It's wonderful. And do join us for more of the conference sessions as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. It was such a great session. Bye.
Thanks to all. Thanks for that. Bye.